CaliforniaClosets.com.
From the Paul Winkler Investments WTN Traffic Center.
Furnace freeze-ups? There's an expert for that.
Let your local heating experts at Donaldson Air Service Experts keep you warm with $50 off any furnace repair. Call 866-EXPERTS. See website for license details.
All right, at 9:05, we have cloudy skies at best. Light rain in the area. Very windy conditions. 64 degrees in Brentwood at the Puffy Muffin. To the north in Hendersonville, 64. Downtown on Music Road, the statues are naked. It's cloudy. It's windy. Light rain, 65. It feels like 65 in Nashville at WTN. The market looks good. A little bit of recovery, at least from Friday. Not a recovery from last week. We're still about 900 or so points off on the Dow, dollars off on the Dow, but going in the right direction. Dow's up 331, NASDAQ's up 160, S&P's up 43. All three are in the green. The market is up at 9:06. I'm Michael DelGiorno, and I know we're February heading into March of a new year, and you're probably living in the same pain as last year, or maybe the last decade. Back pain, neck pain, knee pain, hip pain, elbow pain. It's a struggle just to live with pain, let alone you're missing out on all the things you used to do and love. If you want to get to pain-free living, back to doing the things that you love, your best bet at avoiding surgery and achieving that, or your best first step, even if it ends up in surgery, is the Dr. Gill Center in Franklin. And I know you think of us for chiropractic care, and I don't apologize for that. Chiropractic care really works. But we have very advanced state-of-the-art industry equipment, Class 5 lasers, red light therapy, spinal decompression therapy, a game changer, separation without a scalpel, pinched nerves unpinched, bulging herniated discs repositioned. Dr. Gill was the pioneer in our state of spinal decompression therapy. But it all begins with an accurate diagnosis. So don't do nothing. Don't settle for a pill. And call the Dr. Gill Center and take advantage of our $23 offer. It covers everything, your extensive exam, any and all x-rays and imaging. So don't take a pill. Call Dr. Gill. New phone number, 882-4838. 882-4838. Online at callmepainfree.com. All right, 9:07 in the morning at Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Information-fueled, opinion-driven. That's who we are, and we thank you for your time today. I guess if I had any Facebook messaging, it's too early to tell from the super text line, but certainly personal emails, it was all revolving around the Jesus Revolution. I guess that's somewhat of a compliment that people would turn to me on this topic, and I have to tell you, we had a very, very specific show on Friday, even me prior to seeing the movie. And then, of course, starting at Asbury, now spreading to universities, there seems to be a new wave of revival. And it has been, I'll never forget, one of the first books. I look back, Mac, and, you know, this is what I loved about the movie, The Jesus Revolution, because that's what led to me. It got eventually to New Orleans. But the things that we were reading, the notion that a 15, 16-year-old was reading Why Revival Tarries by Leonard Ravenhill could only come from the Jesus movement meets Keith Green and Last Days Ministry meets me in New Orleans. So I had spent a lot of time coming out of and being the result of a revival that I guess it was top of mind. And I was studying probably, I think, from one of the greatest there ever was in Leonard Ravenhill. So it happens to be a topic that we never talk about, but happens to be one I've spent a lifetime studying. There are certain things I have no answer for, why this happens only in waves, seemingly 50 years apart, or even seemingly generations or centuries apart. There have been great revivals that have impacted the Christendom. The first and great revival were the disciples hitting the streets and changing the world from 12 to what we have today. This movie looks, and we had just talked about this Friday. There was so much we talked about Friday that's in the movie. And we had talked on Friday. Don't forget, the hippie movement led to the Jesus movement, led to the charismatic movement and revival across America. And this movie is a snapshot of the hippie movement to Jesus movement, revival, and the big players involved. Now, to really appreciate the movie is to appreciate reality, which they do a perfect job capturing. I find it, I mean, I always do this, and it drives, Andrew calls it the rabbit hole. But I will go back. I did this with Remember the Titans, believe it or not. I mean, a stupid movie, but just enjoy it, right? You got great actors. You got a great story about race and football. I mean, just give it up and enjoy it. I can't. So I always want to go back and look at reality versus the movie. Everyone who listens to the show on a regular basis, remember when we had Rudy on, and we went over some of the differences between real life. I mean, Rudy's brother was not a jerk.
Oh, that's awesome. I didn't know you did that. That's great.
I mean, Rudy's brother loved him. Rudy's brother was his biggest fan. But as Rudy would explain, well, for the movie, you got to tell a story in 2 hours. You got to just take everybody that says you can't do something and put it in one character. That's just how movies work. So, in this movie, extraordinarily accurate. The inaccuracies, the daughter doesn't pick up the hippie Christian. It's actually his daughter's husband, son-in-law, and brings the hippie home. But other than that, I have to tell you, for those that lived in that time, and it's one of those things that when you're living it, it's special. When you're living it, it's probably not going to last forever. They capture all of that. This is a movement in spite of man and through broken men. Some more noble than others. Some not so noble, and God still uses them. When the Spirit moves, it moves like a wave, but like all waves, it has a beginning, a middle, a high point, and then an end. Now, why the Holy Spirit does that, like a rushing wind that rushes past, I don't know. We came to our best exegete on Friday, which was in all of my study. The thing that meant the most to me was the Bruce Wilkerson book, Lesson of the Three Chairs. And lesson one is the proclivity for generation one to really believe and really live it. And then there's a proclivity for generation two to really believe it, but live in compromise. And generation three no longer believes and lives in rebellion. You're going to see seat chair in the Jesus Revolution. That's the hippie generation. That's the Timothy Leary. They were checking out of whether it was rebelling against materialism, squareness, war, all the things that they were seeing in their cul-de-sacs in their families. That wasn't truth. There was something empty about the religion, something empty about things and career. And these people were wanting to be free. Now they turned to a wrong thing to do it. Drugs, acid, most prevalent. They were going on trips. Keith Green would describe it this way. We knew there wasn't truth here, and here. And I thought if I could get out of my body, maybe I could get above at a higher altitude and see truth. So they were taking drugs. And then eventually the drugs failed them. But there is something about the first right step that draws God in. And it shouldn't shock you. Seek me. Everything is seek, 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 and you will find. So even they were seeking in wrong places, and we're going to try to get one of the Irwin brothers on, but even though they were seeking in the wrong places, at least they were seeking. I give those people credit. They tried Buddha. They tried Muhammad. They were trying out-of-body experiences. At least they were seeking. And when you think about it, it's a really short bridge. The shortest bridge of all at that time was the hippie to Christ. At least they were seeking. The other thing that we discussed on Friday that I think is a reality in the movie, which is once man can't find it, once man is in checkmate, there's nothing, and I think this generation is. We have another story today going over the social dilemma. It's a checkmate. The documentary ends with, welcome to the checkmate. And you got people trying to explore it, and psychiatrists and psychologists trying to understand it and what you can do, how you can play with this fire a little bit or too much and your children will burn. It's a checkmate. When we find ourselves on earth in checkmates, that's when God comes in. The lesson of the three chairs. When we're so far gone in the third chair, not just individually, but collectively. And when even the church, which I think is the most powerful part about this movie, we've kind of become what the revolution was created to address. Because the spirit passes like a wind and then man's back in charge. And what does man do? What it always does, centralizes and ruins. Look, if you're a pastor of a church or if you're a born-again Christian listening to me, this movie should kick you where it hurts. If you don't see your church in the opening scenes, you're either very, very lucky or you're not very honest. And I think if I got John Irwin on, that's what he felt led to do. Accurately portray a revival and a movement that came and went. But it can historically be traced, proven, and the fruits of it expand widely. You realize without the hippies, you don't get the Jesus movement. Without the Jesus movement, you don't get contemporary Christian music. Without the Jesus movement, you don't have, whether this is good or bad, I can't tell you, worship teams on stage, what modern church looks like. It is a movie that every believer must see. It's an understanding of how God moves in revival that every believer must understand. And for those of us unique enough to be alive right now on February 27th, 2023, to consider as you discern what is happening in real time. And so one of the things that we talked about on Friday was I was in a private conversation with David Zanotti, and I am proving the checkmate we are in. And David's always one of these real dismissive, well, with God, boom, that ends it. Because with God, all things are possible. With God, something can change in a moment. And then you're like, well, I get that. Just follow me mentally. I'm just saying, bop, 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 Ichabod, over, we lose. And then I looked at him, I said, yet I feel like, and it makes no mind sense, we're on the verge of a great revival, a great one. The Jesus movement is up there. It's a great revival, one to not be missed and to be understood. And a lot of you are believers today because of it. I am directly 5 years removed. In fact, everything portrayed in the movie, I lived. I've been in houses, I've been to Last Days Ministry, Lindale, Texas. But I lived that, all piled into a house. We'd all go out all week. We'd come across people. You didn't just pass a guy trying to sell papers. You stopped. You talked to him. The next thing you know, he was at the house. The woman whose husband died. The guy whose wife left him. The single mom who has nowhere to go, nowhere to turn. They came in. Kind of fun and adventurous. We had some nuts, too. Some literal nuts. Probably wasn't wise. Probably very dangerous, but it was fun. And I think they captured that. I'm going to say one thing, because Keith Green used to always say, it is seeming that God has two ways to look at us. One is through the law, and one is through grace. The law looks at you and says, you're not so good. Technically. You'll never be good enough. And that's why my son had to die. The grace is, I'm incomplete without you. And all of us who are parents know how that works. We seemingly look at our children in two ways. All I told you was study and get A's. Obey and honor your mother and father. Treat others as you'd want to be treated. And then they fail it daily. Does that impact your love at all? No. Why would your Heavenly Father be any different? I think this movie's going to challenge a lot of things on one side, but ultimately, it's what you're going to feel. And ultimately, what you're going to feel is the difference between religion, man's solution, and being in God's presence. Remember, my son loves the movie and loves the song, I Can Only Imagine. I can tell you, the answer is you're going to run to him like a magnet. And you're going to feel that in this movie. So I'm grateful that, number one, it's historically authentic. And to all the players involved, amazingly fair. To Lonnie Frisbee, to Chuck Smith, to Greg Laurie. I do have one final, not a critique, but a take on the movie that I can't wait if we ever get the director on to ask him why. Because I think there is an opportunity to end the movie 30 minutes earlier. And someone chose not to, purposely. I want to pick it up from there when we come back. My review of what I think is one of the handful of best movies I've ever seen. And by the way, I'm not alone. And by the way, it can't be supported completely just by believers. The Jesus Revolution was the third ranked movie at the box office. And I might add, against Ant-Man and the Wasp, which is a franchise that used to do like hundreds of millions. Now, of course, nobody goes to theaters in those kinds of droves. Cocaine Bear, which is a true story, I might add.
I've heard this movie's really good.
And, I'm going to Jesus Revolution with my wife. She's going, can I say something? I said, what? Deep down, I really want to go to Cocaine Bear. Because she didn't live it like, that's that big 9 years difference. There's nowhere. I will actually go back and see Jesus Revolution in the theater. I just want to go fellowship with it some more. But it's up against Avatar, Cocaine Bear, Ant-Man, Puss in Boots, and Jesus Revolution, third, 15.5 million, just behind Cocaine Bear and Ant-Man. I don't think this is just. And by the way, I also don't think it's a coincidence that the revivals are starting to break out at the universities as this movie is about to come out. Something's in the air, and you should be filled with hope and excitement, because I lived the first one, and it changed lifetimes and generations. And if God's moving like that again, trust me, this time you want to live it, not study it. Great, great movie. If I haven't made anything crystal clear enough, I lived it, and it changed my life. Watching this will change your life. Looking back at, trying to capture such a precious time of my life, this director and the producers of this movie captured it flawlessly. It was a trip back in time. Pardon the pun, from the hippie side. And nobody could have captured it more beautifully than we lived it. For that, I am most grateful. Historically accurate, very accurate to the nature of God, also very honest about the nature of man. Jesus Revolution, I highly recommend everyone watch it. My final thoughts when we come back. And then we're going to get to news stories, which aren't always as fun. Insanely clean carpets. That's what ultimately Zero Res is about. They're the right way to clean. Let me explain why. We don't use chemical shampoos and detergents. We come in with science-empowered water. It's a better way to clean. Remove stains, restore carpets to like new, and without the residue gathering dirt after we leave, they stay cleaner longer, which is long-term value. Although I might add, we are the most affordable way to clean, and it lasts longer. That's the ultimate value. Traditional cleaners are going to use those chemical shampoos and detergents. They're going to leave residue behind. It's going to look great for a while, but then you're going to have to call them back. Zero Res, insanely clean carpets from the beginning, lasting longer. Then the affordability. 3 rooms and a hallway is our February offer. 3 rooms and a hallway, just $129, plus 20% off air duct cleaning as we get away from cold and flu season. And here comes allergy season. What a great way to purify the house. So, Zero Res, the right way to clean. Call today. 3 rooms and a hallway, just $129. 535-9376. 535-9376 online at ZeroResNashville.com.
The Drive with Brian Wilson.
The FBI, what a mess this is becoming. Their mission is to investigate crime and to be the preeminent national law enforcement agency. Not to be involved in politics. As much as I hate to say it, it's time to just strip this agency down and rebuild it.
The Drive with Brian Wilson. Afternoons at 3. Super Talk 99.7.
Mom, we're out of potato chips.
Teenagers, they'll eat you out of house and home, kind of like health insurance, which can take a big bite out of the family budget. Fortunately, with Farm Bureau Health Plan's Core Choice coverage, we can save $3,600 a year compared to the leading competitor. And we've got better coverage with a lower premium, lower deductible, free telehealth visits, and access to one of the largest networks available.
Can we order pizza?
Visit FBHP.com or your local Farm Bureau office today.
Prices at an all-time high, our donors are now getting highest receipts ever. Donate at carsforkids.org and your car can be picked up tomorrow.
1-877 Cars for Kids. KARS Cars for Kids. 1-877 Cars for Kids. Donate your car today.
Now accepting donations of land, homes, buildings, or any kind of real estate.
An election 2024 update coming from a Democrat. 12 people hurt in Oklahoma from that storm system that is still churning eastward and still capable of hurting people. And a major case for the Biden administration goes before the Supreme Court tomorrow. These stories and more at 9:30 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
I believe in God's perfect timing, and I don't think it's a coincidence that the revivals start breaking out authentically and spontaneously at universities among the young. In the Jesus Revolution, it's the hippies and the young. And it's just the commonsensical notion of I don't have any meaning. This isn't working. There's got to be more. That's all man has to do to present himself. Now, I do think, because the majority of the questions asked to me, could this be happening again? And I think it is. I genuinely think it is. I don't have any, from a God's perspective, any better explanation than this is when God comes in and resets the chairs. This is when he supernaturally reached down and takes an entire generation from chair 3 and brings them back to 1. And I think it is triggered when it can't be solved on earth. This generation of believers cannot solve the problem that this next generation of souls has. God has to step in. He has to step in or come home and get us. And I think that's what he's doing. Now, in the late 60s and 70s, it was the bridge between the hippies to Christ, creating the Jesus movement, creating revival. This time it's going to be young people. And I think it has a lot to do with the social dilemma. Being raised by people in chair 2 or 3, there was no other way out. And that's why I wanted to end with this last notion. There is a point, I don't know what the movie is, 2 hours maybe? There's a point about an hour and 40 minutes where it could have ended. And you'd have left filled with joy, filled with the Spirit, tears coming down. All of that could have been perfect, but it didn't end there. And that's the point in the movie where they go off in the crummy car and you know they're going to end up and they kiss on the mountain. It would have been a perfect, joyful, Disney-esque way to end the movie. But it keeps going. And then you start seeing one person get a little ego, get a little human nature, and going too far, you start seeing the dysfunction settle in. The only thing I would have regretted missing is, and I think there's a lot of people who are real into the Christendom that will know Chuck Smith, most will not. Everyone should know Greg Laurie. That's one of the biggest churches in America today. And there's a scene on the rocks where they baptize people in the ocean. And Kelsey Grammer's character says, you won't believe what happened in Riverside. This church just split over some stupid reason. Now the building's sitting there empty. And so Greg Laurie, at that point, the son of a dysfunctional drunk mother and a new follower, so what are you going to do? And he said, well, I bought it. And then the scene is he hands him the keys. There's a key moment. Couple of things that were kind of interesting. The 4 people from Texas, wouldn't that have been funny had they been somebody like Randy Stonehill? But no, there is the legitimate moment where he looks at Chuck Smith and goes, I can't do what you did. And Kelsey Grammer's character says, you're going to do better. And he turns around and leaves. And of course, Greg Laurie goes on to have one of the largest churches in America. But other than that, you could have had a warm and fuzzy ending without getting into man. But I think it might have been intentional. So we could see God came in like a rushing wind and passed and changed an entire generation. And it influenced 2-3 generations forward. In fact, it got to me in New Orleans 5 years later. But then we got involved, didn't we? And maybe the movie wanted to show you that because you really have come full circle. Now, you may not look like the first church when the movie begins, but your effectiveness and your coldness and your reliance on buildings and pastors and traditions over the lost you're passing all week long. And not only are you not making a welcomed place for them to run to for safety, you're not even inviting them. If you don't look at 1968, 9, and 70 in that movie and see 2013, go home, take a couple days, clear your mind, and then go back and watch it again. because with or without you, the wind is blowing. I highly recommend you stand in the middle of it and let it rush through you and have the courage to see whatever God reveals and the courage to die to whatever must die. A good movie, I say go see. A really good movie like Elvis, I actually said to somebody, go like your butt's on fire right now. This movie, yes, you need to see it. Yes, it's a great movie. It's a better way to live is why you should go.
Information fueled, opinion driven. Super Talk 99.7.
I'm Ken Weaver with your top stories. Got the full forecast in 2 minutes. And election 2024. A best-selling self-help author is President Biden's first Democrat primary challenger, 70-year-old Marianne Williamson, formally kicking off her campaign, she says, with an event in Washington on Saturday. 12 people hurt in Oklahoma, and the storm system that caused it still churning eastward.
Another week with extremely dynamic late winter, early spring action going on. So let's go ahead and dive into what's going on with that same storm that brought the Oklahoma tornado damage. And then now in the Great Lakes, it's going to bring a damaging wind threat with an isolated tornado possible from central Illinois right through Indianapolis, Cincinnati, and Columbus, all included. This is a daytime event, so late morning, early afternoon.
Ginger Z reporting. A major case for the Biden administration goes before the Supreme Court tomorrow.
The President's student loan forgiveness program will come before the Supreme Court this week as well. Oral arguments are set to begin tomorrow. This is the President's plan to forgive up to $20,000 in student loan debt for nearly 40 million Americans. The program now put on pause until the high court weighs in. Republican-led states suing the federal government, accusing the president of abusing his power.
That's Rachel Scott reporting. And the latest news. Weather is next. I'm Ken Weaver, WTN News.
From the Beacon Capital Management Weather Center.
Hi, I'm Paul Winkler. We know that diversification is an important part of the investing process, but how do you reduce risk of a portfolio through diversification?
You know, if there was a new movie about Lincoln and somebody said, please don't, I'm carefully trying not to say anything that would give away anything in the movie. But if you were talking about a Lincoln movie, of course, you know how it ends. He gets shot in a theater. It's Abraham Lincoln, for crying out loud. But I have to be more sensitive than that. A lot of you aren't aware of these people in real life. In other words, it's a historic account. You know, you can't ruin the movie for me. I know how it ends, but I knew. But I'm sorry I did that. I didn't mean to. It's just me knowing these people in real life. I forgot you don't. And that I do want you to have that magic when the movie happens. So I accept your rebuke. Brother Michael, stop giving away the movie. Hopefully God blinded their eyes to that if it would have ruined an oh wow moment. Currently, you know what the situation is. Cloudy at best, light rain, very windy conditions. 64 in Franklin, 65 in Mount Juliet, 64 down in the borough. Downtown on Music Row, we're the warm spot. Cloudy, windy, 66. It feels like 66. Market's doing great. Let's not jinx it. Dow's up 246, Nasdaq's up 110, and the S&P's up 31. All three are in the green. The market is up.
Hey there, friends. Aaron with Eurofix here. We do
Hi, I'm
things
Paul
so
Winkler.
different
We
in our
know that
shops. You can tell as
diversification
soon as
is
you
an
walk in the
important
door.
part
Our
of
famous
the
waiting rooms,
investing
none of that
process,
nasty
but
grease.
how do you reduce risk of a portfolio through diversification? Well, you use correlations. Now think of bathing suit sales and suntan oil sales. They tend to move together, right? Think of bathing suit sales versus winter coat sales. More dissimilar movement, and that's the idea. But why is diversification so important? Well, think about it this way. Everybody would like to have this happen with their investments. They just go straight up. But what we know is this is really what tends to happen. Markets may go way up and then down, or down then way up. Now let's say if we isolate parts of that curve right there, and the first curve right there, and the second curve right there. If you're putting money away for retirement, every time you put money in, if this is what's going on, you're buying more shares. Then just before you retire, the market goes up, you're really happy. If, on the other hand, you keep paying a higher and higher price and then the market goes down, you're really sad. And we can't choose what's going to happen with the market next. But what we can do is what we know through academic research, and there are Nobel Prizes awarded for this, is we can look for things that tend to move in dissimilar fashion. And what happens when we do that, we can reduce the volatility of the portfolio, hence bringing those curves in. Now, that's the idea. Now, if you want to learn more about our approach to investing in financial planning, go to paulwinkler.com and set up a free 15-minute phone call. Or you can call 615-851-1950.
All right, after being firmly, and I mean firmly rebuked by a sister, I'm paranoid to talk anymore about the Jesus revolution, other than I do highly recommend you see it. I don't even care if you don't believe in God. It historically happened in America. It is a well-told story, well-acted story, well-directed story. It's a must-see. I will do one last thing that it can't ruin the movie because it's not really expanded upon in the movie. But I think it's one of those ingredients that creates, I'm a firm believer that the minute man can't solve something, God has to step in. It's step in or return, one of the two. There's no other way out. And, you start dissecting what gets us to that. And it's when you're told by authority something and then it proves to not be true. That is something that at our age we can't understand. I mean, we talk about it, right? This is going to be nothing related to the movie. But we talk about it, right? When authority tells you, oh, this is COVID, it's bad, and you could die, and they overplay. The truth of the matter was, if you were very old, if you were very obese, if you were diabetic, if you had heart or lung issues, if you were a long-term smoker, yes, it could be serious, not necessarily deadly. They didn't say that, and they scared everybody. And when a young generation they trust blindly older authority. This comes from a child-parent instinct. When a teacher says something and it ends up not being true, that's demoralizing. When a coach makes you live something and then you see them not living it, it's demoralizing. It's discrediting. And eventually what it builds, let's just do like today's modern kids. They have been told since preschool, let alone K through 12, multiculturalism, new tolerance, political correctness, all the latest woke trends, global warming, COVID. They lose a year or more of schooling over it. And then they hear it's all a lie. Eventually you start thinking, and it feels like rebellion, but it's just natural. They've been discredited. What's broken is the trust of older. An older can't reach. Parents, you know this, right? A coach has a better chance of reaching your kid than you do. Teacher has a better chance of reaching your kid than you do. You know who still has the most power to reach your kid? Another kid. This much you might see in the movie, but I'm not really talking about the movie. I came home from the movie, and you know what was going on in my house? I never said a word. I never encouraged a word. One boy, my daughter's age, decides to start a Bible study at our house. And this was the second one. They're going to search together. They're going to find. And if anything breaks out at their school, it'll be because it started with a kid. So there's so much. I'll just say this. If you don't see so much of 2023 in 1968, 69, and 70, I think you missed a big part of the movie. If you don't see the mistrust for older authoritative figures, whatever we call them today, you'll really miss it. And that's where we get to my main theme with revivals, when there's no other way. He has to get supernatural and he has to come down. He's got to rearrange the chairs. He loves this generation too much to let the failures of previous generations leave them without hope. And as they genuinely search, they will find. And I believe it's happening today. And I think this movie is going to encourage you and help you understand it. I was looking over something before I get to Governor DeSantis. Something fascinating. You know how these things grab my eye. Now, usually, I got to be honest with everybody, every time this happens, these are usually bombs. Because I'm the only one interested. Ken's just typing away, thinks it's stupid. You start looking around. But because there's so little creativity in journalism today. And here's this story. People wish they had a health check engine light. And I thought, that's a brilliant way of looking at it. Don't you? Now, I don't want to second guess God, but can you imagine we had all the lights at Michael, drink some water, you're dehydrated. Now, I'll sit and go, am I having a heart attack? Am I having a brain tumor?
Yeah, exactly.
No, you're dehydrated. But if I had a check engine light, it would just, show the water bottle. Yeah, drink it. The survey of 2,000 Americans found 63% said they struggle with recognizing when their body's trying to tell them something. A check engine light exists for if it existed for their body, 57% would use it to determine whether to drink. Drink water, I should be specific.
Yeah, I was going, wait, what?
That'd be a different light that comes on.
I'm going to say that goes off every Friday around
noon. Noon for you, 6 for me. Oh, that made my chest hurt. 57% said a vitamin reminder. I mean, vitamins are in my, I do my pill, all my stuff at once. I do the fish oil, the vitamin D.
Good. Got to get your vitamin D.
The other one is a multivitamin. I mean, if it wasn't in there, I wouldn't think of it. I don't know that I ever go, oh my gosh, I need a vitamin.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even have that light. 45% said that to alert them to a nap. Listen, that's the one thing I don't need a light for. I need one to tell me to eat. I need one to tell me to drink water. I can
to eat, really?
Yeah, I'll get busy and not eat. And then I'll eat like at best one meal a day, and it's like, I'm like a snake walking around with a bump in my stomach. But wouldn't that have been a neat concept if we now can I just encourage everybody with a couple of engine lights that we do have that could save your life. One is annual physicals.
Yep.
And they're usually covered by most insurance free, no out of pocket. Because that blood work will show an early engine light. They have these, and I'm going to use a brand name now, and that's not to exclude anybody else. But I go to, on Cool Springs. Now, maybe I won't use it because I can't remember it now. Something imaging. Oh, poo-poo Fran and Ollie. No, I can't remember the name of it. But anyway, it's only like $99 to get a lung scan. Don't worry about insurance because there's no insurance involved. You give them a debit card, $99, and you get a CT of your lungs. And if you ever get cancer, you're going to catch it very early if you do that annually. And then they have the heart scan that measures the calcium. So nobody's walking around with clogged arteries getting ready to drop dead of a heart attack. So there are some engine light things you can do. But by and large, isn't that a clever way of covering that story?
That's great.
I don't know. I'm left alone again.
No,
it's too late.
I love it.
No, it's too late. You guys, maybe every time I'm interested in something, you're never interested in it.
I'm just wondering if the light would be exposed to other people, if people would be like, oh, that guy's got to drink some water.
Tap you on the shoulder. Hey, man, you really need to go to the bathroom.
I can tell.
Well, I have a different check engine light for that. I could have done blue-collar men have higher sperm counts. Every construction guy just went, you're damn right.
You got that right, boy.
Being Facebook friends with rich people is good for you.
What?
Facebook friends with rich people.
I think being real friends with rich people is probably better.
Yeah, that's a good way to say.
Everything I was going to say, I had to edit. Especially so close to talking about Jesus Revolution. However, if you are a Facebook friend of mine and you are rich and you feel led to send me $1,000 right now, I'm willing to be the opposite of the Jesus Revolution, the Jesus Pariah. All right. Boy, we got rid of our general manager. You know, there's an interesting thing I haven't heard anybody say out loud.
Preds.
The only general manager the Preds ever had gets replaced by up until a couple years ago, the only coach it ever had.
That's right.
Wow. Trotzi's back. This time as general manager. 9:51 at Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
A best-selling self-help author says she plans to run for president as a Democrat. Got a new wave of severe weather expected today. Hear from some of the survivors back in the southern plains after what happened last night. These stories and more at 10 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Speaking of check engine lights, are my lights flickering in here, or am I having a brain tumor?
No, they're flickering.
They are.
This is driving me out of my mind. Nuts. Driving me out of my mind.
Yeah, that would.
Why Revival Tarries? I brought that up earlier by Leonard Ravenhill. He wrote that, I believe, in 1959, some 10 years before the Jesus movement that's portrayed in the Jesus Revolution even happened. And it leads to this last question, and then I want to change the subject because I want to get to Governor DeSantis and some other topics. But, Michael, from my understanding and ministry experience, been full-time, part-time since I graduated seminary in 2014. Revival always follows tragedy or difficulty. And the one we're talking about, unless you think the tragedy is an ongoing Vietnam War, it didn't in this case. At 31, I've told you I've seen a shift in my generation. Now I'm beginning to see a spiritual awakening. My question is, do you think it has to get worse, like recession, world war? And, of course, why Revival Tarries' premise from Leonard Ravenhill is the reason you're not seeing revival is the bigger the difference between the way the church operates today and the way it operated in the book of Acts, the less likely revival is to take place. That was the case in 1969, and that is really the case today. We are in the centralization business. That's man's nature. God is in the scattering business. And I think it has more to do with some of the things I was talking about. I don't think it's inflation. I don't think it's rumors of war. I don't think it's a world war. I think it's a crisis of the soul that takes place when older generations fail, and only God can step in and right the chairs, as I say it. So, no, I would actually disagree with you. I think it has to do with the conditions of the heart, not the conditions of the world, and the ability for the gospel to be heard. And when man fails to such a centralized degree and such an unloving, closed-minded degree, then the God of grace and mercy must step in. And I think that's what happened in this movie, and I think that's what's happening in our universities today.
Ten o'clock on the dot. I'm Ken Weaver with your top stories, and we've got some traffic problems out there. A crash blocking the right two lanes of Briley Parkway eastbound, right there at the 24 north exit 18. And then downtown, an accident, left lane blocked, 24 westbound at Shelby Avenue. Election 2024, a best-selling self-help author is President Biden's first Democrat primary challenger. 70-year-old Marianne Williamson formally kicking off her campaign, she says, with an event in Washington on Saturday. And a new wave of severe weather expected to slam the Midwest, moving east today. Right now, we've got tornado warnings in the Chicago area. Jim Ryan is in Texas, where all of this started last night.
Straight-line winds that gusted to 114 miles an hour southeast of Amarillo morphed into tornadoes as they moved into Oklahoma. By the time they hit the suburbs of Oklahoma City,
the whole house was shaking. The door was going crazy.
Carly Ochoa lives in the city of Norman.
Our front window busted through, and glass was just flying through the hallway.
25,000 homes and businesses lost power, but Oklahoma is in Tornado Alley, and Carly Ochoa's reaction is understated.
It was kind of scary.
Now, 12 people hurt there by those storms in Oklahoma, and again, the Chicago area under tornado warnings right now. A story published by the Wall Street Journal this weekend on the origin of COVID-19 after the Department of Energy reportedly theorized the virus could have originated from an accidental lab leak in Wuhan after all. But Chinese officials pushing back on that.
Experts around the world say China could clear up much of this mystery if it dropped its secrecy and belligerence and agreed to a far greater transparency into that Wuhan lab. But this morning, the Chinese Foreign Ministry responded to the Energy Department finding, telling the U.S. to, quote, stop speculating.
As Terry Moran reporting, and the latest news. Weather is next. I'm Ken Weaver, WTN News.
All right, at 10:06, we have cloudy skies, windy, light rain now. 65 at the Puffy Muffin in Brentwood, 65 to the north at Hendersonville, and 66 downtown at WTN. The market, Dow was up 230 at its high. Now it's only up 180, but still up. NASDAQ's up 102 at 11,497, and the S&P's up 28 at 39.98. No big correction, but the market is all three in the green and up at 10:07. I'm Michael DelGiorno for Jeff Eddy's Efficient Heating and Cooling of Tennessee. Simply the best and the most affordable, and as I always say, best is not my opinion. They do residential, light commercial. They service all brands, all technologies, conventional and geothermal. They're recognized by Rheem, as one of the leading companies, as providing customers with the highest level of year-round comfort and service. We're an elite pro partner with Rheem. We're a diamond contractor with Mitsubishi. If electric heat and air is your necessity or choice, we have the best products, maintenance, and pricing. And for everyone, we're A+ rated by the Better Business Bureau and licensed, insured, and bonded for your protection. Affordable. You're supposed to maintenance your air conditioning systems every spring and your heater every fall. I have 3 units. That's not bragging. That's just a reality. You may have 4 or 5. Most have 1 or 2. No matter how many units you have, it cannot exceed $125. And we're there a long, long time cleaning these up, making sure everything's ready to go for high demand season. You get that $125 back in energy efficiency, but you're going to save hundreds avoiding emergency repair and thousands avoiding early replacement. You take care of these things and you catch things before they break, or they don't break because you're taking care of them. Time now to set up your maintenance for the spring. Whether it's maintenance, repair, or replacement, trust who I trust. Jeff Eddy's Efficient Heating and Cooling of Tennessee, 784-4424, 784-4424. Online at efficienthvac.net. Oh, Lord. Just checking my text messages. One from my wife. I'm your check engine light. Yes, you are.
There you go.
Others would have called that a nag. But yes, you are my check engine light. I'm telling you, that woman's made it her goal to not let me die. And then this from Corey the Redneck, yard boy. Good morning, my rich Facebook friend. Oh, my gosh. Oh, my chest is hurting.
Oh.
Why does he do that to me? I swear I'm the only one on earth that finds him so funny. He's the only one that makes my eyes tear.
Yeah, he makes you bust up.
That's just.
But he's
that's gifted comedy right
he's
there.
Funny.
Just let it all, listen to the whole thing and then just wait a few minutes.
Yeah.
Good morning, my rich. And listen, if I'm your rich Facebook friend, you're in trouble. I got another very serious question. I really want to move on to other topics, and I'm really paranoid about ruining the movie. So even though I lived this is for some who haven't lived it, a movie, and I'll actually be ruining the experience. It's a very historically accurate movie, The Jesus Revolution. It happened. I am the result of it, quite frankly. I have studied it my entire life. There's no greater fan of contemporary Christian music, and you don't have that without the Jesus Revolution. So I got to be careful because I think I'm talking in general terms about a topic, but it may de-hance your movie experience. This question's a little bit more specific and tailored about revival and church and culture. I think church has been attacked. I think church, church really hurt its own credibility more than anything. I would be a minister right now if Jimmy Swaggart wasn't having sex with a hooker on Airline Highway, and you wouldn't even know he was having sex with a hooker on Airline. Boy, Bella's looking good. Tell him I'm noticing. God bless him.
He does look good. What is it, 30 pounds?
That's way to go, Brother Bilal.
32, he says.
Doesn't like to be at 32? I love you. You look great. Tell him that. He hates me, but tell him that.
He says you look great.
I command my love to you whether you reject me or not. I can't even call you Chewbacca anymore. You're chiseled Baka.
You're chiseled Baka.
Well, Chewbacca is actually pretty chiseled.
He's looking good.
He looks great.
Uh-oh. Oh, my God.
Compressed.
Oh.
3 ice cubes. Just 3.
Yep. Dabbing right now, Ken.
For it shall be at the 54th pound in the 23rd year that the Baka shall meet his soul chew. Dad!
Slightly dabbed.
Are you proud of me yet? Have I done anything that has made you proud? Mom, are you saying dad?
Well, maybe you need to press both temples.
Oh, I'm back. What'd I say?
You said Bell's getting hitched this year.
No, I didn't. Did I?
Well, not hitched.
Congratulations.
But
that's what happens when you start looking good.
Yeah.
Did I say something about for thy shall cut thy hair and shave thy raggedy beard now that thy is thin? I didn't say that? See, that's the flesh speaking.
But you indicated he might get hitched this year.
How good does Bell look? I was in the middle of a spiritual thought and he distracted me.
Seriously. It's great stuff, man.
Switching to your diet, whatever it is.
Not me.
I'm binging and purging, Michael. Oh, well, in that case. I'll stick to Jimmy Dean's sausage.
Oh.
What was I talking about now? I went completely. The serious question. Just as I gave the analogy last half hour of adults being discredited, teachers have caused that. Doctors during COVID have caused that. So there's a mistrust for adults. So if revival's going to come, it's going to come from the youth to save the youth. So I wouldn't expect some 70-year-old pastor to lead us into revival. I really don't. That's number one. Number two, because they've lost their credibility. Number two, getting back to why revival tarries and the follow-up question on that. What Leonard Ravenhill is seeing is a centralized church that has become more man than God. So it's man's version of what God is rather than an authentic experience with a living God. But deeper at the root of it, because Ravenhill would just say, there's no revival because the body of Christ is unholy. All right? He was look, if you thought Keith Green was strict, you're not ready for Leonard Ravenhill. But ultimately, the thesis of it is, the more the modern church doesn't look like the early church in the book of Acts, the less likely revival is to happen. Well, that is true in the sense that if you were living it, revival would be happening continually and forever. I think it's the ultimate solution for why revival isn't sustained more than why it tarries. In terms of why it tarries, I mean, you could create it that way, but I think why it tarries is that, when I think God steps in when there is no other way. And there's no stopping him when he steps in. And so kind of to the previous emailer, I don't think it has anything to do with the circumstances in the world. I don't think tornado warnings are scaring our kids. I don't think North Korea or the Ukraine is scaring our kids. And I think they're hipping up to global warming. I think they're hipping up to transgenderism and bisexuality and gay, lesbian. I mean, they've been exposed to all of that, and they're trying to figure out who they are, and you failed them. And there's going to be a natural void in their life that can only be filled by God. And if you're not filling it, they're going to search. And it may be the last place they search, but then God moves and they find. And so for me, I see the church today very discredited, very centralized. Notice in the book of Acts, they didn't have like a mega church in Corinth. And if you wanted God, go there. And then when you got there, everybody's just staring forward at one person talking, and that's it. That isn't what you see in the book of Acts. These people they're scattering, they're going. That's what you're going to see in the movie. That's what I lived in the Jesus movement. We were out all week, seeking God, loving God, coming across hurting people, and bringing them in. Hey, man, just to stop. Imagine in this day and age where everybody's projecting a life rather than living it, where everybody is spending 10 hours a day in screen time, trying to fill a void that is impossible to fill with narcissism and loneliness. And in real life, somebody stops and looks them right in the eye and says, "Are you okay? Do you need something? Can I pray with you? Listen, we got a place on Wednesday night that we all go. It means the world to us. Why don't you stop by? When's the last time you invited anybody to something? When did you ever like something so much or was working so well in your life that you were led to?" I mean, I think that the ultimate answer to the follow-up question is, if we're honest, what you're going to see in the Jesus Revolution, what we all lived, or what will happen in the one that is brewing right now, is when people actually love the lost and the hurting more than themselves, when they would rather go around and be with the lost and hurting more than gather with the found, you will look more like the church of Acts than the church of today. And you won't just change your neighborhood. You won't just change your community. You won't just change your county and your state, not even just your country. It'll sweep the world. That's what's so powerful. But I have studied this my lifetime, and there's three things I always circle. One, when it can't be solved by man, it beckons God the Father. It forces him out of heaven. And we are truly at one of those points. This generation of believers can't reach these generations of lost souls on their own. Today's pastors can't reach and revive this generation of. I think God has to step in for the young people, and he is. The other is centralization versus scattered. And I don't think it's so much triggered by the circumstances of culture in the world. There has to be a great betrayal and a gap that can't be bridged that forces God to act. And I really do think that this is happening again. I guess that would be some 50 years later, right? Almost to the T.
Pretty much, exactly.
The way things happen, and boy, it's something to be excited about, because I've been to a lot of great churches. I don't remember most of them. I've been in the presence of God, and I remember every single time. That's what I wish for you. Anyway, I'm too paranoid to talk about it anymore because I might give away the movie. I keep forgetting historical from those who don't know it and will experience it like a movie, so I refuse to talk about it anymore. I will say, go watch the Jesus Revolution. All right, I want to get to Governor DeSantis. Here's my setup, and it's very simple. Number one, I would never suggest who you should vote for, and you've got another year and 9 months to figure it out, and you don't need me. Number two, you should have all choices. Anybody that's trying to narrow your choice to Trump and DeSantis only, I think is doing you a disservice. Third, there are differences. Not many at all in policy, but differences in style, which in a very clever way is exactly where Mark Levin started with Governor DeSantis in an interview. I want you to hear some of the clips of it next on WTN.
You got cars on top of cars, cars in houses as a result of tornadoes in Oklahoma, and now we're monitoring tornado warnings in the Chicago area, part of the same system that slammed the Southern Plains last night. Got some election 2024 news and a war on Ukraine update. Looks like the city of Kyiv coming under attack again. These stories and more at 10:30 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
I can't remember what year it was that Moore, Oklahoma, was just destroyed.
1999.
Was that? There was an earlier one, too, though, wasn't there?
I remember the May 3rd, 1999.
And I thought there was one in the 80s, too.
Oh, there was, yeah.
Yeah, because that's the one I drove. I drove. Maybe, I know that wouldn't have been 99 unless I was in Oklahoma City on business or something and I went and passed by. It could have been. I don't know. Listen, when you get old, you can get off by a decade.
Well, and Moore gets hammered all the time.
Oh, yeah, I think it might have been earlier because I was going to my old friend Shank of the Night on KOMA by his house. And of course, it was the area by his house was like clean slabs. That was really eerie. In that, you literally just saw a cement slab like it was just laid. They hadn't even started building yet. Maybe a little bit of a pipe sticking out. I mean, it was. But the debris, when you talk about cars stacked on cars, houses stacked upon houses, there's nothing like that. Was an F5 and more. And you just can't imagine what Mother Nature can do in her fury. So our thoughts and prayers are with all those people. All right, as I stated earlier, I'm not trying to tell you to vote for DeSantis. Anybody, you start playing that nonsense with me, man, I'm going to tell you to go listen somewhere else. If you love Donald Trump, praise God, love Donald Trump. If you love Ron DeSantis, praise God, love Ron DeSantis. That's for you to decide. And guess what? I get a right to decide. And who you vote for is none of my business. And I don't think the even notion that somebody on the radio would play a clip from one candidate and you should feel defensive. We're going to have plenty of clips of everybody before this is over. So that's number one. I don't care who you vote for. That is your business. And I respect it and respect mine. Number two, there are some clear differences. I don't like anybody telling you that it's down to DeSantis and Trump, and I don't care as we get closer how many polls or even primary results suggest that. You should still be open to all candidates running. You should vet them all and consider them all. And then finally, the differences between Trump and DeSantis. Like a stereotype that's true, that's the case. I don't think they have any differences in policy. But I think you're going to notice a big difference. One has credibility from being president with policy. One has credibility from being a governor with policy. The question really becomes, like Ronald Reagan was a great communicator or called the great communicator, who better to communicate these things? I'll never forget, and this is no slam whatsoever. I used to pray for Elizabeth Hasselbeck because here she is on The View. Now, that's a show I wouldn't even have been on. And maybe that's my mistake. That was just so ridiculous. And then she was a lone voice. And in that, the responsibility to make our case as powerful as possible, outnumbered every day. And whether or not that was beyond her ability or not could be someone's opinion. I just think it's a bad place to be. But there was a pressure when these people are attacking and saying ridiculous things. Dear Lord, give her the words. Give her the truth to come back at them with. So some people are better spokespeople than others for a cause, for multiple causes. Now, what does that boil down to? Well, if you love Donald Trump, you should love Ron DeSantis. Policy-wise, credibility-wise, someone that gets wokeness and is willing to speak against it and defeat it. That's the only thing I reject when people want to play the game of, well, only Donald Trump will stand up to people, and you got to act like that to do it effectively. No, you don't. I'm about to play a clip of a guy who does the very same thing in a very different style. So I don't think it's a coincidence that Mark Levin doesn't come right out and say, people love Donald Trump, but they're not really comfortable with his style or the things he says. Are you the Trump policy without the Trump baggage? He's not going to do that. Mark Levin's too smart for that. So he talks about this book. Number one, he actually wrote his book, which most politicians don't. And number two, Mark Levin goes, at no point in this book do you ever attack anybody or bash anybody. Was that on purpose?
Well, look, I actually wrote it. As you know, most elected officials aren't actually writing their books. I mean, you write all yours, but it's not an easy thing to do. But I think it comes across as more authentic because it is me writing this. And I also don't believe in some of the gossip stuff. It's like if you and I would have had a private conversation 3 years ago, why should I regurgitate that and put that out there when you were talking to me in confidence? And so I try to focus on the policies, the principles, and then a lot about what does it mean to be a leader in this day and age? Because as you know, Mark, when you're standing for our values, you come under assault in American society. It's not just from leftist elected officials. Of course, you've got to battle them. You've got woke ideology taking over so many of these different institutions, corporate America, our bureaucracy, universities, that if you're standing for the right things, you're going to have to show courage under fire if you ultimately want to bring this stuff in for a landing. And so we had to do that so many different times. And I just felt that's something that I think people are going to be more interested in than me kind of dishing about private conversations I may have had with somebody that people know.
You're conservative? What does that mean to you?
I want to stop right there, A, because it's 29 minutes after the hour and 46 seconds. But that's a beautiful, open-ended question. Now, I am interested in how Donald Trump supporters are going to feel about this answer if you want a super text. But I will say this. I've never heard a better answer in my life, and you'll hear it next.
.10:30 on the dot. I'm Ken Weaver with your top stories. We've got a crash on the East Loop downtown. It's going westbound, and it is backing things up all the way to the 40-24 split, and then 40 all the way back to 440. And then, of course, the South Loop is backed up, especially for folks trying to go westbound on 24 to get to the East Loop. We're monitoring tornado warnings in the Chicago area, part of the same storm system that walloped the southern plains last night. Here's Norman, Oklahoma Chief of Police Kevin Foster.
The hospital has seen 12 patients with injuries from the storm. None of the injuries reported were life-threatening.
Election 2024, 70-year-old best-selling self-help author Marianne Williamson will be President Biden's first Democrat primary challenger. Actually, she is. The Associated Press says Williamson announced today she'll formally kick off her campaign with an event in Washington Saturday and then spread out across the country afterward. That's the latest news. Weather's next. I'm Ken Weaver, WTN News.
Hi, I'm Paul Winkler. We know that diversification is an important part of the investing process, but how do you reduce risk of a portfolio through diversification? Well, you use correlations. Now think of bathing suit sales and suntan oil sales. They tend to move together, right? Think of bathing suit sales versus winter coat sales. More dissimilar movement, and that's the idea. But why is diversification so important? Well, think about it this way. Everybody would like to have this happen with their investments. They just go straight up. But what we know is this is really what tends to happen. Markets may go way up and then down, or down, then way up. Now let's say if we isolate parts of that curve right there, and the first curve right there, and the second curve right there. If you're putting money away for retirement, every time you put money in, if this is what's going on, you're buying more shares. Then just before you retire, the market goes up, you're really happy. If, on the other hand, you keep paying a higher and higher price and then the market goes down, you're really sad. And we can't choose what's going to happen with the market next. But what we can do is what we know through academic research, and there are Nobel Prizes awarded for this, is we can look for things that tend to move in dissimilar fashion. And what happens when we do that, we can reduce the volatility of the portfolio, hence bringing those curves in. Now that's the idea. Now, if you want to learn more about our approach to investing and financial planning, go to paulwinkler.com and set up a free 15-minute phone call. Or you can call 615-851-1950.
At 10:34, we have light rain, 65 degrees in Franklin this hour. Cloudy and 64 in Mount Juliet. Light rain, 65 in the borough. Downtown on Music Row, a breezy, wet 66 that feels like 66 at WTN. The market, well, we're running out of steam and we're running out of green. The Dow is now only up 50, was up 240. NASDAQ's up 71, and the S&P's up 13. All three are in the green, but the market is basically flat. I'm Michael DelGiorno for Blue Umbrella Medical of Middle Tennessee. Actual health care with real results. That's what we set out to be, and that's what we achieved. Because we know how frustrated you are with sick care that doesn't work. No answers, no relief. Dr. Jay Hitson and her team of talented physicians, including MDs, are different. We're all in one place waiting for you, not sending you and referring you elsewhere. Number two, we use state-of-the-art lab testing to get you real answers. You deserve them. Then we use very advanced diagnostic equipment to get to the root cause of your problem. Then we treat that root cause with cutting-edge regenerative treatments. That's what we do for neuropathy. And that's why we're able to stimulate, reactivate, and regenerate the damaged tissue and nerve endings. So finally, you can get immediate and long-term relief. And it's all covered by insurance. And it begins with an absolutely free consultation. So if you or someone you love or care for is suffering from neuropathy, innovative, integrative health solutions await you at Blue Umbrella. Set up your free consultation today. 610-6937. 610-6937. Online at bluumbellamedical.com. Information fueled, opinion driven. That's Super Talk 99.7 WTM. Again, I'm going to go over my disclaimers. So far, looking at the Super Text hotline, I can tell only one person is trying to get contentious about this. Is not a contentious moment. America's broke. It has serious problems. And it's time for serious people to lead us. You may very well believe that serious person is Donald Trump again. Great. I am not speaking against that in any way. You may love Ron DeSantis. Great. You're going to like what you hear. Personally, I'm somewhere between ultimately Rand Paul and Ron DeSantis. And if you disrespect that, that's your problem, not mine. So we're a year and 9 months out. Let's hear from all of them. Let's vet all of them. I'm going to give Nikki Haley every bit of my attention and ability to win my heart and mind, as I will Ron DeSantis, as I will President Trump again. Mike Pence, I'm struggling with, but I'm trying to be as open-minded as I'm encouraging you to be. Now, having said that, Donald Trump wasn't on with Mark Levin last night. Ron DeSantis was. He is the governor of Florida, and he's somebody I'm taking a good, long, hard look at for being president of the United States because he's doing it at the state level. He's fighting the cultural war more effectively than anyone, and he has a state that everybody's dying to get to and live. I think that needs to spread. Interesting in their conversation, Mark Levin asks him, are you a conservative? Seems like a softball question to ask a conservative. And then he asks him, what is it? You're going to love the answer.
You're conservative? What does that mean to you?
Well, I think the foundation of it is understanding the American project. Our rights come from God, not from the government. The founders rejected the divine right of kings, and it used to be some people did have rights, but it was a courtesy of the state. So that's not how our system works. We have these God-given rights. We loan power to the government under a constitution to protect those rights. And I think that what we've seen in more modern society is we've seen an unmooring of those constitutional foundations. We have an administrative state which is totally out of control. It violates people's freedoms. It's really been weaponized against factions of the country that the ruling class doesn't like. And we need to reconstitutionalize this government. But what we're facing now, I think, is not what the founders intended in terms of how this government should be operating.
These principles are throughout this book. So my question to you is this. You went to Yale. You went to Harvard Law. You grew up under very modest means. You were a great baseball player. But through all this, particularly Yale and Harvard, how did you maintain your principles, faith, belief in God, these conservative principles? Was it your parents? What was it?
Well, I talk in the book about, so I grew up in a town called Dunedin, Florida, which is in the Tampa, St. Petersburg area. My parents, my father's from Western Pennsylvania, my mother's from Northeastern Ohio. So that is like steel country, that is like blue collar, salt of the earth. And as you know, Mark, Florida is very eclectic. People kind of come from all over. We do have a culture, and so I grew up in that culture, but really it was kind of those Rust Belt values that raised me. I get to Yale. I had no idea what I was getting into. I didn't even know colleges were liberal. I mean, I was like 18 years old. I show up my first day, and in Florida, we would wear things like jean shorts, flip-flops, and a T-shirt. So I show up my first day wearing that, and you've got kids from Andover and Groton, and I was a fish out of water, and it was a major, major culture shock. I wasn't like a refined conservative in terms of politics, because I was mostly into sports and things like that. But you start sitting in some of these classrooms, and even though one of Yale's mottos is for God, for country, for Yale, sit in the classroom attacking religion, attacking God, attacking the United States. I'm sitting in class and they're saying that the U.S. was to blame for the Cold War, not Joseph Stalin. So this is and I had never experienced that because growing up in Dunedin, I didn't know if people were Republican or Democrat. You know, you had both of them, but everyone kind of believed in the core American principles. And so that was my exposure.
I want to stop right there on that one because that one could be misunderstood. I can tell you, and I think I'm older than Governor DeSantis, but even in 1979, 1980, 1981, my sophomore, junior, senior years, of course I was, for me, I always say this, and I want to bring back up religion again and make anybody uncomfortable, but for me, faith informed everything. So my faith led me to lean Republican. And even in 1981 and 82, the Democratic Party platform and stances were offensive to what Scripture had transformed and informed my worldview and policy views. But by and large, it wasn't, like a daily thing on the menu. So even though I wouldn't even have walked around consciously dissecting that, I'd have been more like Governor DeSantis. I mean, I knew there were Republicans. I knew there were Democrats. I knew that my parents were probably Democrat. I was probably Republican, but like him, I was a baseball player. I was a basketball player. I was a football player. I wasn't thinking about those things. That is a time that was allowed because our differences were much more nuanced than today. It wasn't life and death like today. Today, it's either you love America or you hate America. You believe in life or you believe in abortion or abortion on demand. I mean, it wasn't so vastly different. We weren't walking around at that point thinking all blacks were bad, or like today, they have to walk around and wonder, are all whites bad inherently? Everything wasn't so different. In fact, you'd have to dig to find the big differences between Republicans and Democrats. Now, oh my gosh, they're going to find you before you find them. I think that's a powerful thing to remember, that America has probably not since the Civil War been as divided. And even this today, we're divided over more things than we were at the time of the Civil War. And they're big things, as big as the one that caused the Civil War.
To the left. And I think what it did for me was it was so different from what I thought was appropriate that I wasn't influenced by it in terms of it pulling me in that direction. I rebelled the other way. So by the time I got through college and law school, I was definitely set. Although when I was running for Congress, I kind of tell the story in the book. I was green. I had never run before. I had kind of an impressive resume. I had served in Iraq and done things. So there were things that conservative primary voters would like. But, you see Yale and Harvard, that is like people say liberal elitist stuff. And so the question was, how do I prove that I'm actually mean what I say? And I was like, listen, how many people that go up to Washington, they say they're going to do these things, and then the swamp co-opts them, and they end up not following principle? Well, listen, look at me. I got through Yale and Harvard and came out more conservative than when I went in. The swamp's going to have nothing on that, and they appreciated that. But I always told myself, none of this will fly in the real world, because you get out there, this is all just pie in the sky stuff. Well, I think, though, the joke was actually on me, because I think what we see with a lot of the woke ideology and all these institutions in society, this is a reflection of what a lot of these universities have produced over the last generation. And so we're reaping a lot of what was sowed in those classrooms 10, 15, 20, 25 years ago.
I want to circle back to that. But you graduated with honors from Yale. Then you go to Harvard Law School. It's like, oh, my God.
All right.
Oh, wait, hang on. I got to take a quick break here for that.
I'm standing here in front of...
Why does that do that? Every time I go to hit that, I miss the button. This is interesting that they're dusting all this out. I don't know where the obsession with Harvard and Yale came in this interview, or why this particular segment is so focused on it. I guess I'm kind of torn in that when I say Harvard and Yale, is that a disqualifying thing, or is that an impressive thing? And I guess maybe in the woke war, it becomes a mistrusted thing. I still think they are impressive. You get your undergrad from Yale, you get your law degree from Harvard, you serve in the military, then you serve in office and live. I mean, I think the battle he's fought prove his conservatism as much as the language used in this interview. And so I was very interested to see where they were headed with this particular portion. And I don't know if, I guess what I'm trying not to say out loud, but I got to say out loud is this going to be an area that Trump's going to attack? And maybe Mark Levin knows that.
Happens there. But then you decide to go in the military. What was that all about?
Well, I graduated college before 9/11, and I just remember growing up in like the 90s. Cold War was over. We didn't have a care in the world, probably at the height of our power as a country looking back on it. And then 9/11 happened, and just the world changed, and we were engaged in conflict in Afghanistan, pending in Iraq, and I just felt like that I should serve. We didn't have a draft. I didn't get paid by the Navy to join my education or anything like that. It was just something that I wanted to do, so we volunteered to do it. I commissioned while I was at Harvard. Ended up starting my career down in Northeast Florida, Naval Station Mayport. Eventually did stints in places like Iraq. And just as a volunteer with that, too. I mean, I was not mobilized to deploy to Iraq, but they needed people. So I raised my hand and say, hey, send me, I'll go. And I just respected the country so much. I respected people that had served. My grandfather was in World War II. And I just thought it was something I should do.
Now, I would tell the audience, all of this is in this brand new book that comes out on Tuesday. You can get it from Amazon.com right now. The Courage to Be Free, Florida's Blueprint for America's Revival. We're in a culture war. We didn't start it, but what I call the Marxist left, they started it. It is devouring our institutions. It is devouring our politics. It's devouring the private sector. You have CRT, critical race theory. You have DIE or DEI, you have ESG, and all of a sudden I feel like it's just piling on top of us. This is something you obviously as governor have noticed in the classrooms, the sexualizing of little kids. Disney, Walt Disney has to be rolling in his grave right now, what's happened to Disneyland and Disney World, and these other events in the culture too. You've kind of taken the lead in taking this on as far as governors go. Tell me about that. What caused you to say, I got to do something about this?
Well, think about it, Mark. So, I got reelected November 2022. Largest vote that any Republican governor in Florida history has got. Largest vote margin any governor candidate's ever got. 1.5 million votes. I can win by 1.5 million votes. Make the Democratic Party in our state basically a rotten carcass on the side of the street. And yet, the left can still impose their agenda on my people if I'm not looking after fighting ESG and other woke companies and some of the stuff going on in the universities and the schools. And so I think I have an understanding that these fights are far broader than just one particular election. Yes, you do have to fight the woke in the halls of government and in legislative chambers. And we have supermajorities as Republicans in Florida, so we will win all those fights. But you also have to be willing to defend your folks against this agenda being shoved down their throat from all these other institutions where these people aren't necessarily coming up for election. So you talk about things with like the young kids and with Disney. And I see that not just through the eyes of a governor, but also through the eyes of a dad.
I will add, too, he was probably handled COVID as well as any governor in the country as well. He doesn't even bring that up or reference it. There was that middle portion, and I'm like, are you I couldn't tell what was going on. Were you going to try to make a case, Harvard, Yale, military, that this was all crafted, and it just kind of kept going. So I would say it was a fair to friendly interview would be my assessment. And my guess is for Mark Levin, he's like me. I can love Donald Trump and I can love Ron DeSantis. And I can love taking a good long look at Nikki Haley or even hoping for Rand Paul. I mean, we're all just vetting and understanding. I will say this, having watched the entire interview. If Ron DeSantis' intent was to show you that he has all the same accomplishments of Donald Trump with a better education, he has served and fought over and over again and proven himself on the same policies that you loved about Donald Trump, but can do it and articulate it in a less nasty way. In other words, the Donald Trump 2.0 I've been looking for, all the great policies without all the bad rhetoric. All I can say is he definitely accomplished that in the interview. And this is typical of what draws people to Ron DeSantis. That for everything you loved that Donald Trump did, he will do. And for many who have uncomfortable ways in which Donald Trump would sometimes do it, you get a non-compromised but eloquent account for what he's fighting for. I think that's going to make him a top 2 candidate, if not number 1. It's a great interview. And, for those that are holding their breath, waiting for Ron DeSantis to misstep, it hasn't happened yet.
Got a crash eastbound South Loop downtown, right there before the 24 interchange. It's backed up all the way to Charlotte. We're monitoring severe weather right now, prompting tornado warnings in the Chicago area. This is part of the same system that hurt 12 people, damaged numerous homes in the Southern Plains last night. Free money from a pandemic era policy is coming to an end. These stories and more coming up at 11 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
I'm going to go into summary mode here. Red makes a couple of great points I want to share with you. He said, there's that scene in Four Christmases, Ken, where they're on the roof and his brothers start teasing him about
getting a college education.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Make fun of me for being educated. Yeah. Number one, I think being a Yale graduate and a Harvard law school graduate, these are presidential credentials, all right? Then serving in war, very presidential. But what Red says is, and don't forget, too, that Harvard and Yale weren't as woke as they are now in 2001 and in 2005, which is a good point. But he said education is much like a diploma. It's very important in the first job, but then as you get more and more down the road, nobody cares about your diploma. Now your life experience, your work experience, and your accomplishments are all that matter, which is exactly what I was trying to convey, not just with what he brings up in this interview, but how about COVID? He was a shining example for COVID. He's a shining example in effectively fighting wokeness. Now, again, whenever I do this, I'm kind of like the middleman. I know there are passionate people. It's like we asked the question last week that people would dread to answer. Well, everybody but Trump supporters. Do you think America can be great without Donald Trump being president? Most honest Trump supporters will say no. They really genuinely believe. That's where their desperation, that's where their zeal, that's where their passion, that's really where their intolerance for anybody supporting anybody else comes from. And I think it's fed a little bit by President Trump's rhetoric, pride, and narcissism. So I don't think I can't say it any better than I did last week. You will not find a political solution to a spiritual problem. You can find political solutions when spiritual problems are solved, but not the other way around. If a revival happens, it's the worst thing that could happen for Democrats. Because people's faith and values in the Word of God informs them, and it usually informs how they vote. You don't suddenly become a Jesus freak and suddenly love abortion. Or believe global warming is going to be how the end times are defined. So, but I guess the dilemma for the Republicans are, and I would word it with this week's question, which is, if you love Donald Trump, how is it you don't love Ron DeSantis? What could you possibly have loved about Donald Trump that you don't see in Ron DeSantis? But the reverse of that is there things about Donald Trump that made you uncomfortable, but that this interview shows you can have all the fight, you can have all the victory, you can have all the principle without anything to be ashamed of. I mean, if this was conscious, it's a great first step for Ron DeSantis. And if all you care about is America, now what would be best for the party? For those two, I don't think they can, with both home addresses being from the same state, but eventually unite. But I can tell you, one is slamming the other, and the other is just slam dunking the issues. You may disagree, and there's a phone number if you do. 737-WWTN. You can super text or super call, whatever you want to do. But I would think that's a very, very good first step for Ron DeSantis. And not a coincidence he chose Mark Levin, too. 11 o'clock.
Eleven o'clock on the dot. I'm Ken Weaver with your top stories. We've got some pockets of heavy rain out there right now over Nashville, and the streets are wet. Don't know if it has anything to do with this crash, but it's blocking things up. South Loop downtown. It's going to be 40 eastbound right there at 2nd Avenue, 4th Avenue exit. You've got the right lane blocked, and it's backed up all the way to Charlotte. We're monitoring severe storms, prompting tornado warnings in the Chicago area this morning, part of the same storm system that produced tornadoes in the Southern Plains last night. Frances Taylor near Oklahoma City says she and her kids hunkered down in their home and then the roof blew off.
God blessed us that we weren't injured or anything in any way. So I have a little cut on my head, but that's okay.
12 people in the Oklahoma City area went to hospitals for injuries during last night's storms. Free money from a pandemic-era policy coming to an end, affecting more than 30 million Americans who receive SNAP benefits.
This is a program that was put in place during the pandemic, providing an additional stipend to low-income Americans who rely on food stamps. It was only meant to be temporary. It's now expected to expire on March 1st. And just to put this into perspective, that means for the average family that relied on these benefits, they will lose $95 a month. Others could lose up to $250.
Rachel Scott reporting. And the war on Ukraine, Ian Pannell is there. He says fighting's intensifying in the eastern part of the country.
Fierce fighting ongoing in the Donetsk region in the east of the country. That has become, of course, the main focus of Russia's bloody invasion. New video from Russian state media showing the terrible destruction in the key city of Bakhmut. Kremlin forces intensifying efforts to capture it. We're seeing non-stop shelling, heavy street-to-street battles and casualties on both fronts. Russian forces are claiming to be advancing with offensives not just there but against surrounding villages.
He says multiple drones have been launched against Kyiv, and that's the latest news. Weather is next. I'm Ken Weaver, WTN News.
All right, at 11:07, we have light rain, cloudy skies, windy conditions. It's just cloudy and 65 at the Puffy Muffin in Brentwood. It's some light rain, sprinkles 66 to the north in Hendersonville. We got a light rain downtown. 66 feels like 66 in Nashville at WTN. The market, Dow's up 51, NASDAQ's up 84, the S&P's up 15. Nothing really to write home about, but all three are in the green, and the market is slightly up at 11:07. I'm Michael DelGiorno for Loan Pronto. What if you could be credit card debt-free? And that would be an actual reality in about 10 days. Not to mention, you'd be saving as much as $1,000 a month. That frees up cash flow to afford inflation. Gets rid of variable interest debt as we head into recession. And the peace of mind of going to bed 10 nights from now with no credit card debt. Well, it could all happen for you. Loan Pronto's new Express Equity Line of Credit program is just what you need. And the rates have been at a 5-month low. So tap in, some of you, since you've done your refis or your home values have gone up, tap into a small portion of that equity and get a super low monthly payment. It can all be done in 7 to 10 days. You could have a check in your hand for $50,000, $70,000, $100,000. Use that money to pay off high-interest credit card debts. You can access up to 90% of your home's equity, and 9 out of 10 of the homeowners don't even need an appraisal. Even if you did a refi recently or just bought your home, you can still tap into that equity with this fast and easy program. Stop the madness today. Start living in financial peace. We'll have it all done in 10 days. Say no to 24% interest rates on credit cards. 499-5780. Call Loan Pronto, 499-5780. That's 499-5780. Online at loanpronto.com. Equal housing lender, NMLS 1661781. Subject to lender approval. Well, this isn't my first rodeo, as the old expression goes, so it didn't matter how many times I said, number one, you got a year and 10 months. It's your business to support who you support. Right now, you should be open and vetting everyone. And if you support Donald Trump, I certainly understand that. And if you support Ron DeSantis, I certainly understand that. But we're going to talk about Ron DeSantis now. There's a reason I do that disclaimer, because I know what Donald Trump supporters are going to do. They're going to go crazy. So one responds, oh, so it's Trump supporters you hate. Could we play back the last hour? Did I ever bring up I hate Trump supporters?
No.
Did I ever bring up I hate Donald Trump?
In fact, you said that you are one and you voted for him, and now you're vetting and you're looking through the other options.
Then he follows up with, the tolerance goes both ways. The Beatles were obnoxious too. Not like those pre-packaged sweet little monkeys. I have no idea where you're going. I can tell you that I wasn't born yesterday. And A, that is not true. I never said it. B, your ridiculous, irrational comment isn't going to be applied to all Trump supporters. I'm not that shallow and naive. I think there are a lot of really intelligent people who loved America when Donald Trump was president, loved the fact that he did what he said he would do, and that it worked. And I think they have a very reasonable position to want to support him again. Now, if the conversation should evolve to, do you really think he's the best chance? What about all the positives he brings, but the negative being he could really unite a party against him? Or that there might be difficult uniting the entire party behind him. Just because you move on in conversation doesn't erase the first. One person said, are you condescending Trump supporters again? I am a Trump supporter. I am also a Ron DeSantis supporter. I am also a Nikki Haley supporter. I like Mike Pence. I can't legitimately get excited about him being president.
Ramaswamy.
I think it's going to take somebody tough.
Ramaswamy.
I'm open to them all. It's a year and 10 months before the primary. This is what the primary is for. It's their job to win my vote. I'm telling you, I've seen the problem, and it's not always the candidates. But no one guy on Super Talk text line is going to make me make any assumptions about Donald. I will tell you, by and large, a lot of Donald Trump supporters might be fed more or they should be careful to not be fed more by the negative qualities of their candidate without all the positives. That would be a nice way for me to say it. But big shocker, right? You go to the super text line right away. There's a couple of, "You're not all for Donald Trump. You're dumbass." Okay, whatever. Okay, let me show you how dumb Republicans can be. So it's the dumbest thing we've seen. I mean, boy, that's a tough question. I shouldn't say it that way. What's the dumbest thing we've seen Democrats do, right? I can't think of anything as ridiculous. I mean, it's a tough call, and it would open up a whole debate. But I think the most pathetic, dumb place they found themselves is that their worldview has so failed. Their policy views have so failed that people have to flee their states. And their solution is tax them as they leave and tax them after they leave. The very reason that ran them away, let's do it on their way out. Your gas is so disgusting and smelly. I have to leave the room. Wait, before you leave, on your way out. I mean, you could go all day on that, right? Not the fart, on the, that you have so failed. God doesn't matter, family doesn't matter. Let's kill some babies. Let's tax everything. People are fleeing. I've only had it happen once, and it was on a National Day of Prayer. But when people get so, there's no more powerful statement than getting up and walking out. What a failure. I mean, it leaves no conversation, does it? You've had another 246,000 people leave your state this year. Oh, and they went to these 4 states that are antithetical to everything you believe and have done in the state they've left. It's a pretty deafening vote. It's one they have no way of using any kind of voter manipulation to address, do they? I mean, there's nothing like the Founding Fathers' final say in voting, exercising your vote with your feet. Well, that brings us to South Carolina because, Republicans don't want Democrats to be the only idiots. A South Carolina state senator, Stephen Goldfinch, has proposed a bill. I thought about doing this for the longest time. I just didn't want to play games with you. Do the whole story and have you all react, because I bet you would have thought it was a Democrat trying to do it, and you'd find out it was a Republican. I'm telling you right up front, it's a Republican idiot. So if you think, that's why I always say it's not about right versus left. It's about right versus wrong. You're still looking for a party solution to an American problem, just like you're looking for a political solution to a spiritual problem. It's way off. Both parties are the problem. Both. So here's a Republican in South Carolina, Senator Stephen Goldfinch. He's proposed a bill. It's called the Yankee tax. Can I just stop right there and say how offensive that is as somebody born in Flint, Michigan, who spent most of his childhood in Syracuse, New York, and Chicago, and the last few years of his childhood in New Orleans? Why would you name it the Yankee tax? Oh, that's Southern charm. Ultimately, you're still fighting the Civil War? Grow up. There's nobody fleeing to your state that was in the Civil War. This is how you welcome them? They're going to come work there. They're going to pay taxes there. Let me welcome you to the Palmetto State with an insult and a tax. And this guy's a real peach, isn't he? If passed, the state referendum, new residents moving from out of state to South Carolina would be required to pay two one-time fees, $250 for their driver's license and $250 for their vehicle registrations. It's just a Yankee tax. I mean, first of all, there's 2 ways of looking at this. If I was thinking about moving to Charleston, I'm not going to let $500 keep me from moving there. Not that you're on my list, because you're not. Top of my list, Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. More likely on my list, I don't know if I want Florida.
Italy?
Well, yeah, out of the country is top on my list. All right, but bottom line is, all joking aside, $500, that's not going to stop anybody from moving there. And $500 isn't going to change anything in South Carolina. The statement is it, right? That's what's insulting. The principle is insulting. You're going to call it a Yankee tax? What if they're fleeing Louisiana or Mississippi? What if I flee Tennessee to go there? Is that still going to be called the Yankee tax? What do we do? We're going to march in with our $100 bills. The Yanks are coming. The Yanks are coming. I mean, somebody, a governor, a state senator, a rep, a talk show, somebody call this guy and say, you're making an ass out of us. I'll give you $500 to polish your shoes, straighten your tie, and shut your mouth, you moron. Did he just call Donald Trump a moron? Hell yeah, I did.
Get him out. Throw him out into the coat. Don't give him their coat. No coat.
Truth be told, I'm probably leaning more. The only one that is a slam dunk is Rand Paul for me, but I'm kind of leaning towards DeSantis over Trump. But there's a part of me that leans Trump the same way I lean for Mayor Barry coming back, Megan Barry. I miss the entertainment. Joe's falling downstairs. Remember when Don was like, get him out. Get him out.
I loved it.
We were
no
on,
coat.
We were on the live. Me, you, and Tommy were on there live when that happened.
Yes, and it was like 12 degrees where he was then.
Throw him out. That's it. And, it doesn't. I can't have any conversation. Look, if you're one of those that if I can't say to you, I have no problem with Donald Trump being president again. And I love him. There might be a better way. There might be a way for both. I don't know. That's your choice. My choice. We'll figure it out together. Anything but, what we have. That's why, if you can't say right now, a year and 9 months out, I'm a Nikki Haley supporter. I'm a Donald Trump supporter. I'm a Ron DeSantis. I'm open to all of them. As long as you're not saying I'm a Mayor Pete supporter or I'm a Joe Biden supporter. Unless you're doing great with all this inflation. But imagine this idiot. And then call it Yankee. Goldfinch told Fox News Digital that the proposal is not to try to stop people from coming. No, just insult them as they're walking in. What an A. I almost said it. Excuse me. It's not our intent to stop people from coming from other states, just for new residents to catch up with the rest of us. By calling them a Yankee and taking $500? I'm not trying to build a wall. This is not a fee against new residents. It's a fee for people to catch up with the rest of us. What? Yankee 500? I don't know, State Senator Stephen Goldfinch, but I would like to announce he is my loser of the day.
Still got that crash backing up the South Loop at downtown. It's right there between 3rd and 4th Avenue, and it's backed up all the way to Charlotte. The right lane is blocked by that crash. We are tracking tornado warnings, 5 of them right now in effect between Chicago and Indianapolis, and a new wave of iPhone thefts being reported. We'll tell you how to protect yourself coming up at 11:30 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
All right, I think this is probably one of my favorite stories of the day, and allow me to explain why. It kind of flowed where I show you how dumb they are in South Carolina, so let me show you how smart they are in North Carolina, but that's not it. Don't miss that. Don't take that head fake. Why this is so encouraging is, and this is going to I'm going to be an equal opportunity lover here for a second. I'm kind of watching the top-down movement that's going on, and certainly I will forever give credit to Donald Trump for being a powerful force as a president, to speak against all this wokeness, to speak not only with commonsensical solutions that have been put off for decades and then doing them. So first we see from the presidential level, Donald Trump addressing, and the left goes nuts. So he's the first to shake the beehive, and the bees are just going nuts and flying. But then we see people like Ron DeSantis at the governor level, Governor Abbott at the governor level, some others rising up, starting to not take it anymore. You're starting to see some mayors now going, well, this whole national movement of let's defund and dismantle all police, that was a big mistake. This takes us to the next level, which is universities. And then the third and final level is really yet to happen. It's when you rise up and realize corporate's place at the table and start holding them accountable. Now, you may end up in the dark and in silence by the time it's over. That's how many companies are involved, which is why the story next half hour gets into a filter of the biggest threats. I have often said the silent, most destructive force at the table that no one ever notices is the corporations. They get away with murder. They get away with presidents don't get away with. They get away with Congress doesn't get away with. But I want to take North Carolina first because this is starting to happen at the university level. In growing backlash against woke culture, the board of the University of North Carolina moved to ban diversity, equity, and inclusion requirements from its hiring and promotion process. School's Board of Governors voted to ban DEI statements from hiring and tenure decisions. The Chapel Hill-based school shall neither solicit nor require an employee or applicant for an academic admission or employment to affirmatively ascribe to or opine about beliefs, affiliations, ideals, or principles regarding matters of contemporary political debate or social action as a condition to admission, employment, or professional advancement. What a huge victory late last week that no one noticed. A nonprofit that has been advocating for an end to DEI requirements in institutions across the country took credit for a lot of the move. How did this new tolerant, intolerant, in the name of tolerance, PC, woke movement advance? The same way it'll dismantle. Now, time will have its impact. There's an entire generation that's about to realize the nonsensical nature of all of this and reject it. So it's going to die of consequence. It's going to die of time and truth. But these are major signs. And I said from the very beginning, there has to be an opposition. There has to be a resistance. There has to be a consequence. And I think all three are happening at once. But it is one of those that once it's revealed, it's nonsensical. When you look back, just getting back to kind of the context of what we were talking about, there's some people you're just never going to get to reasonably listen. I will forever be grateful for Donald Trump for starting the entire movement at the presidential level. Then you're going to be grateful to a handful of governors. Now, don't forget, even as I say that, Donald Trump failed the COVID test. He got completely duped by Fauci. But just like I had I loved George W. Bush, but he failed the border. I can see those things and still love somebody. I'm a flawed human. But history will remember Donald Trump as somebody who wasn't supposed to be and was. And he was a transforming force. Was he perfect? No. Did he make mistakes in style? Yes. Did he have a really bad day January 6th? Yes. Did he cause an insurrection? No, but he had a really bad day. He did some really dumb things. But I will always love him for the movement he created and then the governors that followed. And now you're starting to see, as you go down the road, you're starting to see mayors, you're starting to see universities. It's all unraveling. And its next stop are companies. And you got to go there. Because you're going to find they're a much bigger seat at this table of wokeness than you thought. And if they don't see it coming, they ought to. Because they're next stop. They happen to be the next stop of the show as well. Stay with us.
.30 on the dot. I'm Ken Weaver with your top stories. Still have the South Loop eastbound blocked by a crash there in between 2nd and 4th Avenue. It's backed up all the way to Charlotte. It is blocking the right lane. Now a new crash reported. This on Briley Parkway southbound. Overturned vehicle. The exit ramp is blocked there. Briley Parkway southbound at I-40 right near the airport. Tornado warnings in effect south of Chicago. 3 of them in between Chicago and Indianapolis. Part of the same storm system that hurt people in the southern plains last night. Here's Norman, Oklahoma Chief of Police Kevin Foster.
The hospital has seen 12 patients with injuries from the storm. None of the injuries reported were life-threatening.
Yeah, a new wave of iPhone thefts to be on the lookout. Thieves first observe you enter your passcode on the home screen. Then they move in to swipe your phone in busy places like bars or shopping centers. They use that passcode that they just witnessed to change your Apple ID. Then they can open your bank and cash transfer apps. And apparently there are a number of ways to minimize your risk.
You want to make sure you're hiding your passcode, just like you would your ATM pin. Don't be pressing it out in the open for everyone to see. And then you also want to use a different passcode for your money apps, things like Venmo, Cash App, things like that. And then use a third-party password manager to keep all of your passwords in a separate, safe area of your phone. And finally, if you can use the screen time area, it's under settings on your iPhone, and you can actually block changes to your Apple ID password.
That's Trevor Alt reporting, and the latest news. Weather is next. I'm Ken Weaver, WTN News.
Hi, I'm Paul Winkler. We know that diversification is an important part of the investing process, but how do you reduce risk of a portfolio through diversification? Well, you use correlations. Now think of bathing suit sales and suntan oil sales. They tend to move together, right? Think of bathing suit sales versus winter coat sales. More dissimilar movement, and that's the idea. But why is diversification so important? Well, think about it this way. Everybody would like to have this happen with their investments. They just go straight up. But what we know is this is really what tends to happen. Markets may go way up and then down, or down, then way up. Now let's say if we isolate parts of that curve right there, and the first curve right there, and the second curve right there. If you're putting money away for retirement, every time you put money in, if this is what's going on, you're buying more shares. Then just before you retire, the market goes up, you're really happy. If on the other hand, you keep paying a higher and higher price and then the market goes down, you're really sad. And we can't choose what's going to happen with the market next. But what we can do is what we know through academic research, and there are Nobel Prizes awarded for this, is we can look for things that tend to move in dissimilar fashion. And what happens when we do that, we can reduce the volatility of the portfolio, hence bringing those curves in. Now that's the idea. Now if you want to learn more about our approach to investing and financial planning, go to paulwinkler.com and set up a free 15-minute phone call. Or you can call 615-851-1950.
All right, currently 66 at the Puffy Muffin in Brentwood. We have 67 to the north in Hendersonville. Downtown, the sun is peeking out.
Hey.
I wouldn't even call this mostly cloudy anymore. This is darn near partly cloudy. 67 feels like 70s, 67 in Nashville at WTN. Market started off gangbusters, then it dipped way low. Now it's headed back up. Dow's up 109, triple figures. NASDAQ nearly triple figures, up 97. The S&P's up 21. All three are in the green. The market is slightly up at 1136, and that's good news. USS. United Structural Systems has been the go-to company for decades when it comes to concrete lifting, waterproofing, and foundation repair. Started with Dad, son's still there. The biggest difference you're going to notice is when you call us for an inspection and an estimate, number one, it's free. Number two, it's no obligation. Number three, a salesman doesn't arrive. We send a project manager to make sure there's nothing major happening. You start seeing bricks cracking. Could be bricks cracking, could be the sign of early foundation issues. We want to know. And you should want to know. Denial is getting you nowhere, and time is not on your side. If it is something significant, you want to catch it early while you have options and affordability. The longer you wait, inevitably, the more expensive it's going to be. The same is true with moisture in the crawl space or basement. Concrete's always pretty simple. It just cracks and sinks. But what are you seeing? We guarantee our best. Call United Structural Systems, USS, today. We have over 23,100% satisfied families. We're A-plus rated by the Better Business Bureau, and your inspection and estimate is free. 227-2275. 227-2275. That's 227-2275. Online at USSTN.com. Information fueled, opinion driven. That is Super Talk 99.7 WTN. I am Michael DelGiorno. So we're kind of talking about this top-down movement, if you will. What's beginning to happen is the death of wokeness. Now, I always say this. The death of a lie, the cause of death, is always the truth. A wrong direction, the cause of death is always reality, consequence. Now, the person that begins it always gets the most attacked. You'll continue. They're not going to go down without a kick, a scream, and a fight. And so we said, first and foremost, you got to give credit to Donald Trump. He was an agent of change. Now, I always challenge people this way. What did Donald Trump stand for that wasn't in the Republican Party platform? Give me one thing, and you won't come up with one. The difference is he got sick and tired of watching people say it and not do it. And he came along and said they can't do it because they're a part of the problem. So he took advantage of an outsider window and as a non-politician ran and shocked everyone and won and then shocked everyone even more and did it. The worst thing that Donald Trump did to Democrats was he said he was going to make America great again, and he did. They're still dealing with that today. Never mind the games they're playing for election results. That's still ultimately their biggest problem. Black constituents whose lives were better under Donald Trump than they are under Joe Biden. Hispanic constituents whose lives were better under Donald Trump than they are under Joe Biden. And the loss of those constituents, the gender gap that was closed. So the biggest agent of change was Donald Trump from the presidency. Then we started seeing some star governors doing it. I wish I could say ours, but I can definitely say it in DeSantis. I can definitely say it in Abbott and some others. Then we started seeing some mayors, even in blue cities, rise up and go, some of these woke policies aren't working. This has got to change. We must return to law and order. We must return to serving and protecting. Then we gave you a great example at the University of North Carolina where they're saying, no, we're not going to put up with all this woke nonsense. Huge story Thursday that hardly anybody has talked about. The school board of governors voted to ban DEI. That's it. Gone. Well, what's the next level we talked about? You're getting closer and closer to the people in a revolution. And I've often said, one of the, you can go back to even COVID. Am I the only one that noticed how quickly the mantras of stay home, stay safe, this is the new normal was all being sold by companies instantly in their commercials? Who has advanced this? I mean, there's two ways to look at it. You want to look at them as media or you want to look at them as entertainment? Do you want to look at them as corporations? Comcast, Disney. There's some in the radio business, major companies. In the print business, major companies. In retail, major companies. How have they been getting away with it? I don't know, but they have. What are they going to ultimately die of? Well, consequence, the failure of this worldview. Or the same way they got into it, they'll just follow the next trend. Or maybe you need to apply that consequence. That's what these hero governors did. That's what the hero president did. That's what the University of North Carolina is doing. So next stop becomes companies and then individuals. Well, that brings us to companies. In the growing backlash against woke culture, the board of the University of North Carolina moved to ban diversity, equity, and inclusion requirements from its hiring and promotion process this week. The governors voted to ban DEI statements from hiring and tenure decisions. Boom, done. Now we go to businesses. Now, the problem with businesses is, that's just University of North Carolina. There's a lot of other universities. Business is even worse, right? And if we boycotted them all, we'd be sitting in darkness and in silence. It's not a secret that over the past decade, hundreds of large U.S. corporations have adopted woke policies, regularly injecting left-wing ideals into their products, services, and employment practices, not to mention their advertising. But some of these businesses have recently gone much further than merely promoting social justice causes. They have chosen to target any conservative customers or employees, coercing or forcing Americans to abandon their deeply held beliefs in order to receive important goods or services or stay employed. That is discrimination. Although many conservatives have heard stories about corporate discrimination in recent years, they've often struggled to keep track of which businesses have been part of this movement, which have largely stayed on the sidelines. Well, a new project has been launched by 1792 Exchange, a nonprofit organization, and it seeks to shed light. This is not the first company who has done something like this. It seems to be the latest and one that is potentially going to be very effective if part of the movement is consequence. Now, what I love about it is somebody's got to bridge the gap between, well, if I start boycotting everybody, I won't be able to watch anything. Won't be able to do anything. I'll just be sitting at home in the dark. So what they do that I think is different and that I really like is they research thousands and thousands of companies and based on a very specific criteria, rank them as low risk, medium risk, and high risk. You know, I'm an old-fashioned good, better, and best guy. I always strive for best. Sometimes all you can achieve is good. Sometimes you just got to make do with, with good, even though better and best is where we need to be. So I think that's, Now, when you start doing all this, and I'll get into it in a second, you end up with 51 very high risk. So according to the group's website, high-risk companies have generally canceled or denied business relationships based on viewpoint disagreements. They pose a high risk of canceling people and businesses who do not share their views. That's very intolerant. They actually fail their own worldview. Out of more than 1,000 companies that were evaluated, about 147 are currently classified as high risks, which means they're much more likely than other businesses to engage in direct discrimination. Now, we got to get into all the two other areas. Now, this one in particular, this particular story on Fox News, said that they carefully reviewed the 147, and they selected 51 of the most impactful for this article. And they start with the category of banks. I'm going to do probably only banks. The story's on my Facebook wall if you want to go examine it some more. And then I'm going to apply it practically to what I did with it and what you may want to do with it. Perhaps the most influential groups of woke companies in the report are banks. Numerous large banks are using their financial might to effectively force customers into adopting climate change policies, for example, even when it will require that those customers dramatically change their business practices. Many of the banks have also weaponized their operations to promote social and ideological views that are favored by the left. For example, Bank of America vets its vendors based on their commitment to the LGBTQ views. And it has ceased lending with some gun manufacturers based on gun laws. It has also provided funding to Planned Parenthood, as well as the Southern Poverty Law Center. I think I'm still on their hate list. Bank of America and its CEO, as well as many of the other banks that have been assigned high-risk scores by the 1792 Exchange, have been some of the biggest supporters of the radical environmental, social, and governance ESG movement. Now they start getting into high-risk banks. Ally Financial, Bank of America, Berkshire, Deutsche Bank, Fifth Third is on the list. Morgan Stanley, PNC is on the list. Royal Bank of Canada, Truist, U.S., Wells Fargo. Now, just in banks alone, because I can only do one category, they also do transportation. You're going to get into airlines, retail giants. You're going to get into, surprisingly, Home Depot. That one's the simplest one to do because you could easily just shop at Lowe's instead of Home Depot. Some of these, like banks, are not so easy. There's very few left to go to. But you're going to start seeing lists of people now. And then what's really interesting is sometimes, like, let's say you go into a car dealership. Don't forget, you could have the low risk would be everybody. Medium risk could probably be just about everybody. But this is high risk, 147, broken down to the top 51 for the purposes of an article. That's something you could almost keep top of mind. But I mean, just think of all the banks I just read off to you. They're all on the high risk. So if you were going to try to give them some consequence and not do business with them, well, you're going to be sitting with your finance guy a long time at the car dealership as he keeps coming back with where you want. I'm thinking TD Bank. That's I had a small difference on a trade-in for Alex's. It went to TD. Well, I'm going to pay it off probably here in about a month or so. There's one other, Truist, Fifth Third. These are all big banks that are in our area that we might be all doing business with. So, and I'm not calling anybody to do any of this. In fact, I just leave it at this for the sake of a segment. I think it's important to know it. I mean, you know Ben & Jerry's, you know Starbucks, you know who it is. But I think that's part of the movement. I think in the case of Disney, sure, it took a governor to stand up to them. And when the governor said, look, I think I'm being reasonable. I don't think 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old kids need to be sexually indoctrinated. I don't think they're at a sexual point in their life. And parents should comfortably be able to send their kids to school knowing this content isn't going to be covered. That's reasonable. And that's a governor standing up to them. But ultimately, its failure is all parents come to that sensible conclusion. So I don't want to over-weaponize a list like this. It's a tool. It's interesting. I think the big picture is, as Donald Trump impacted the presidency, as some key governors have impacted states, as universities are now starting to wake up that woke is broke, we're seeing it now get to companies. Companies have the most cover because the number is, they're all participating. They're very similar to universities. They're all participating. It's hard to narrow it down. This is a tool that can help you narrow it down based on levels of risk and the criteria of that. Really, really, really radical stuff like defund police campaigns, going beyond pro-choice to pro-death, being very disarming or disadvantaging with gun laws. I mean, they're going to go through all these different policies, and it gives you a way to see them, and it gives you a way to make some choices. They're certainly going to make some choices for you if you try to work for them. Maybe you should send them a message. This gets back to the Charo analogy. If we just continue to have one side pressure and have a voice and the other doesn't pressure back and have an equal voice, well, then no wonder things have gotten so lopsided. But I also see a bigger movement spreading down. And I think in the long run, when it completes itself, historians are going to have a hard time ignoring it began with Donald Trump and then positively went to governors and then positively went to universities and then positively went to corporations and then positively, eventually, the people had a voice. And it ended it. There's some really good news buried in all of this. Once again, lies are dying and their cause of death is truth. Failed worldviews are dying and their cause of death is consequence. And I see it getting very, very close to all of us. And we're going to have some people to be thankful for. In fact, two of them, Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis, may even be opponents. I hope they can effectively find enough common ground to explain that to the American people through this primary process, because it could complete this process that has already begun. It's 11:52 at WTN. Hey. It's 11:55 at Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Yeah, I realize this is probably a bigger picture thing to be solved by management. I had somebody, and I don't even understand it all, so I just make an open confession. I don't get it. But like when you go to WTN TV, it'll say something like, why don't you have more followers? I don't know what's involved in all that. I can tell you that I have a Facebook account. And it maxes out at 5,000 friends, and there's 5,000 friends, and there's another 12, 13,000 followers. That's how I communicate with my audience. If there's a way, like somebody saying, could you post that on I have no way of posting on a WTN site of any way. So like when you send me a super text, I respond with a link to that story so you have it. I can tell you if you just hit Fox News and 51 big businesses the target conservatives, it's going to pop up. I mean, you really don't need to go to any of our sites to see those stories. But and in it, it's going to break down all the categories and the criteria that makes somebody a low risk, a medium risk, or a high risk. And then in the high risk, it's the story design and the writer's design to break down the 147 high risks into 51 big businesses that have really made a practice of targeting conservatives. So these are people that are adversarial to your worldview. So you may not want to do business with them. I'm not calling anybody. My point of doing the whole segment was not to encourage you. I can tell you that me personally, I try to do as much business with people that believe like me, but I'll do business with people that don't believe like me. But not if they're actively trying to destroy people like me. And I think you have a right to know, when you do business with people and you choose to spend money with people, if they are very intolerant towards your worldview, your beliefs, your values. I think that's legitimate. Like in everything else, you can read into what I'm saying. I'm not calling anyone to boycott. I'm calling you to the truth of an organization that does a good job of showing you low, medium, and high risk. That makes it actionable. Where in the past it's been, if you wanted, there's very few. You end up sitting in the dark. You said chump. Chump. I have no idea. I don't remember saying the word chump once. This was interesting. Are you going to address Andy Ogl's resume? That's a Phil Williams story, and that's a Phil Williams story that basically says that the only way you can have any understanding on a topic is to have a university degree and an A+ in that degree. Well, if that's the case, number one, I'm probably disqualified every day I talk to you about topics that I don't have degrees in. If my personal opinion is it felt like an attack ad, and if it's going to be an attack ad, I want Andy to respond, not me respond on his behalf. So we'll reach out to Andy Goals. Maybe we'll have him on the show tomorrow. I know we'll have James Carafano and 3 more hours of pursuit of truth and understanding. Hope you'll join us tomorrow at 9. The Matt Murphy Show, wearing like a Sinatra hat, is next.